again, very humble, very privileged to be here at American University. I thank very much the authorities and the professors here that make this possible here at the K Spiritual Center. Very glad some Venezuelans are here too. But like always, Washington is a place where you'll find people from all over the world. This is something that I'm beginning to find out really fast. Um, like introduction, I I'm a sociologist and heading an NGO in Venezuela. This is not my first career. Probably this is my second career, being that before that I was doing market research for big companies. Sometimes I tell people, young people, that you might have maybe once or twice the opportunity to change careers in your lifetime. Because then, if you change 5 or 6 times, you're not getting anywhere. You know what I mean? So, so basically, this is my second chance at achieving something different, and as a sociologist, I always thought I had to give back something. Uh, People who study sociology has to have like a knack for it. You have to like it. It's not something your parents would say. You should study sociology. You know. Um, they don't know, what you're gonna do with it in the future, if you're gonna be able to make ends meet or do something productive with your life. But I found out that we have a broad field of let's say work, and I found my niche in Pasactiva and working. I'm working for the NGO sector already for 15 years, and I find it very rewarding. And recently I was told, you're up for a human rights award. And it's just like, what? Yes, yes, I mean, send your CV, and this, it's another NGO back home. It's called the Hannah Arendt. You know Hannah Arendt is, and that's like a research center, and they say, yes, they're promoting you for this award for a human rights defender. So like, well, I'm not a real human rights defender per se. I said, I don't see myself as one, um, just because we don't defend people. We don't defend cases and bring cases to the human rights organizations, and have somebody told their story or something like that. We don't do that in Pasactiva. And I really found out later on that was just a feeling for the other candidates who actually won. So they would say, oh, there was a real competition. You would just put your name there, and maybe in a few years you'll win. But for now, you're just a filler in the list. But having said that, I was recently in in a hearing at the Organization of American States, where a group of human rights defenders were in one side of the table, and the other side was the the state representatives. This was no more than I don't know how many minutes do I have. 20 minutes, I was told.
20 minutes is good.
Yes.
Then we'll
Okay.
have some Q&A.
All right. So, because we Latin Americans tend to ramble a lot. So I'm just going to put the clock I have set up here so I don't surpass those 20 minutes. So basically, the state in one side, human rights defenders in the other, and I had sat there before also. I wasn't in this session, and in one side, basically, it's the only way actually that you would sit in a country like Venezuela in front of public officials. You won't have that opportunity in Venezuela. It's not happening. If you go and say, well, I want to meet with the minister of this, or I want to meet with this public official, it will never happen. It will never happen because no one's authorized but to speak for the government, actually. So it's in these types of scenarios where you can actually have human rights defenders and the state in front of each other and tell each other whatever they want to tell each other. Well, within 20 minutes, right? And in a very diplomatic way. And the thing that the state, in this case, the government back in Venezuela, uh, is always saying is that, well, you guys, let's say you're the human rights defenders over there, and they're saying, human rights are big business for you guys. You're all sponsored by the United States. You're all part of the war against the socialist revolution of Chavez and all this, blah, blah, blah. And, they have the same discourse over and over and over again. And I wasn't there, but I was thinking, is it really big business for human rights defenders? Are we getting like big bucks from this? And I'm thinking, no. I mean, it's not business. And they say, well, we don't understand how you are profiting from defending human rights, saying that they receive money from multilateral organizations, being the European Union or being some other organization here in the United States or somewhere else in the world. But the fact of the matter is that they're saying it's big business, and here in the Constitution, they always have a small Constitution at hand. It's a little blue book they're always showing. It's about this size, actually. So you would have to go and, try to read. You would have to be young like yourself to read it. And really good eyesight. And basically they would say, well, the Constitution says here that we're all human rights defenders. So we don't need specialized people to defend human rights. We're all human rights defenders because the Constitution says so. So we don't understand why you have to dedicate yourselves to being human rights defenders. I mean, the Constitution says that we are all human rights defenders. I mean, every Venezuelan citizen is a human rights defender. So, okay, that's great. So these people shouldn't be specializing in that, or shouldn't be addressing, I don't know, freedom of speech issues, or torture issues, or migrant issues, et cetera, all these problems that we have back in Venezuela. So they were saying that it's useless. I mean, you're just responding to an international system of human rights that attacks progressive governments like us, like the revolutionary government of Venezuela. And basically the human rights system is just trying to attack us because basically, it is the United States actually the one who violates, more the human rights in all over the world. So this is the discourse and saying basically, and that's why they have renounced, or they're not part of the Commission of Human Rights anymore, although they have to sit because still they have some, let's say, some cases still in progress, but after those cases are closed, they won't sit anymore at the commission. So what's then for human rights defenders? Well, it's difficult to know. In Venezuela, probably there's two classes here, right? Those classes are what, basically human rights or something related to human rights?
Foreign policy and international law and organizations.
Okay, foreign policy, which is great.
And international law and organizations.
Which makes a lot of sense why you're here. Again, Venezuela sees these NGOs and the ones who support these NGOs as the enemy. And why not? We're not the enemy, but still we're in the other side of the sidewalk. I mean, you're in that side, we're in the other side. And why are we on the other side? Because basically, who violates human rights? In theory, who can only violate human rights? The state. The state, if it applies a policy that is systematically against whatever right you want to bring up, is the only one who can be processed for human rights violations, the state and its representatives. So, the government, I don't know, these people apparently are scholars. They're saying like, well, that's not true because if a delinquent kills another person and it's homicide, he's violating his human right to live. So it's not only the state who violates human rights, everybody can violate a human right. Or if you attack a journalist as a citizen and you somehow hamper his ability to report news, then you're violating his human right as an individual. This is what the state says. I mean, they don't even understand what human rights are.
Don Luis, the pizza, ha llegado la...
Ha llegado la pizza.
Entonces,
Bon appetit. Buen provecho. Like I was saying, basically the government is the only one who can actually violate human rights by definition, but they play this out for the general public, saying like, we're not the human right violators. Anybody can be a violator of human rights. So in that sense, they actually, get away with a lot of these violations. How, for example, an NGO that is dealing with human rights issues work in Venezuela? How does it operate in an environment that is so spiky, let's say? As you know, well, Venezuela, it's not in a situation where it can say, oh, everything is grand and fabulous. No, everything is really dark and dreary right now back in Venezuela. After the death of Hugo Chavez, you know who Hugo Chavez was, right? Even the Somali taxi driver in Minneapolis knew who was Hugo Chavez. So he died, and the country just became at a standstill. Something from I don't know, the Twilight Zone. You know what I mean? Everything just stopped, and Chavez just disappeared from everywhere. I mean, basically, he went to Cuba, and we didn't even see him again. In other circumstances, if we were a proud country, we would invade Cuba for taking our president and not bringing him back, But the fact of the matter is that it's very hard for human rights defenders back in Venezuela because the history of human rights in Venezuela is kind of sketchy. Saying that human rights is something kind of a new thing. You know what I mean? A new thing for humanity in general. And back home, I mean, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, we wouldn't talk about human rights. We would talk about social issues, and usually would be the Catholic organizations that actually, like Fe y Alegría, which is a very famous one. It's called Faith and Happiness. It's a Catholic organization that dealt with social issues and took upon poor children and educated them. And so basically organizations 30, 40 years ago just were, taking care of social issues, not human rights. Now they can classify it as human rights defenders, and some do. But the human rights movement in Venezuela came upon around 1990 after El Caracazo, which was a big social upheaval in 1989 because of social reforms and economic reforms where people went out and riot. And after that, there were a lot of human rights violations. A lot of people got killed by the state systematically to control that rioting. And from that, some organizations actually came about trying to defend the rights of those victims from that period. And then it's not until the 1990s, actually, and 2000, where there's an explosion, a myriad of NGOs that are born. Paz Activa was born in 2000, so we're almost teenagers, 15-year-old teenager. But for the most NGOs, they're like 20, maybe 30 years old at the most. So the tradition is very short on human rights organizations, apart from the Catholic ones that have worked for the last 50, 60 years in the field. So how do we operate in a very polarized and we have to say very reactive society? Because again, the government stance is that, they don't violate human rights. Their discourse is saying that human rights were violated before they arrived, That's when human rights really were violated, after we came upon the revolution, then we actually, those violations they disappeared. They didn't happen again. That was thanks to Hugo Chavez, of course, because he's the almighty Hugo Chavez, and now he's the galactic leader, because he's alive somewhere in some other planet, apparently, like Elvis lives. You know what I mean? And the fact is that the government doesn't see themselves as human right violators, and that's why human rights violations that's why they don't prescribe, because if they would prescribe in time, that would mean that the person in power, if they stayed their whole life in power, they would never, be prosecuted for these violations. That's why Hugo Chavez, died in power. He said, like, there's no way I'm gonna be out of power. And the people who are right now in power, they believe that they will be in power for 1,000 years, like the Reich, like the Third Reich. They would say 1,000 years of revolution, at least, because their model is the one who's gonna save the world, not Norway or any other country here has the model to save the world. We have the right model to save the world. And to save all other planets, by the way. That's what they say in the last session. They say that the revolutions are not only for the planet Earth; it's for all planets. I say, well, great. And I guess human rights apply. The human rights only apply to humans, because if you find somebody that is not human, it wouldn't apply to them actually. So it's very hard when you have a situation where, first of all, there's no access to information. There's no way you can ask government officials to tell you, for example, on crime, how many homicides were there last year? They won't tell you. You have to figure that out for yourself, okay? And if you're working in citizen security, the crime issue has been politicized severely. So if you talk about these issues about crime and how crime affects society and what is or what the government is not doing to tackle and prevent crime, and then they would say, well, we don't care what you say. We don't acknowledge you exist. By the way, we receive money from the government, from Venezuelan government. We have a project on road safety, and they deemed that project was not very political, because road safety, well, usually the bad guys, it's the alcohol, the booze, it's not the government. And we decided to work on road safety basically because there's a lot of people who get killed in accidents. And there's a famous NGO here called MAD, right? Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Have you heard of that, right? And it has a lot of tradition. It has a lot of power in Washington. And the lobby is very strong. And that's why if you get caught drunk and driving, you go to jail for sure. Because MAD, they were really mad about it. And basically, what I'm saying is that kind of access that MAD had here to control or to have impact on policy is non-existent in Venezuela, because nobody's going to receive us, and either way we do cutting-edge research on the matter, we'll send it to them, to the government, to the officials that have to deal with it, but they won't acknowledge that whether they use it or not, they won't acknowledge that Paz Activa or the observatory was part of it. So we've been, for example, looking at the TV and we're looking at there's a presidential speech, and the president Maduro, the current president, is saying, well, after this horrendous homicide of this actress that happened recently, we have decided that we're going to establish a fund for the victims of homicides and kidnappings. And he was reading all this, and it was the proposals we did. He was reading our proposal, right? But he didn't say, oh, and thanks, Paz Activa, for sending this out, because we were using your proposal and your research to actually bring this forward. And that's how we were. I mean, we're not looking for any acknowledgement of how well we do our work. It would be nice though, but um, the fact of the matter is that everything we do is for the government. It's for the government to do a better job. We're not doing anything against the government, which is what they think. They think everything we do, um, it's against them, and it's a personal battle against the government. So you human rights defenders are attacking us, who obviously the government is forever good and wholesome, right? And of course does not violate human rights, but again, it has a lot of flaws. And the fact of the matter is that today Venezuela has one of the highest crime rates in the world, around 25,000 homicides. The kidnapping rate is, well, it's probably the top one in the world also. And then criminal activity, petty crime, organized crime, something we're researching. It's just everywhere. The corruption is overwhelming in Venezuela. We're talking about, some people are talking about kleptocracies, being that the people who are in government just, I like to call it the piñata syndrome. You know what a piñata is, right? Right. So this is the piñata, and these are the politicians, right? They hit the piñata, and the piñata, it's actually every time they hit the piñata, money comes out of it. So this is the piñata, and we hit and hit at the piñata until we take every little penny out of the piñata, and that's kleptocracy, basically. And they don't want anybody to be monitoring what they're doing. They don't want any watchdogs. They bought all media, they bought all the newspapers, they bought all the radio stations, but they don't want it to be scrutinized. Access of information is non-existent. Okay? So you don't know how many houses they built. You don't know how many hospitals they built. You don't know anything, basically. It's a culture of shroud and obscurity that obviously resembles a lot to the Soviet bloc in the 70s, 80s, and the Iron Curtain. Well, there's like an Iron Curtain around government where you can't see anything and they won't tell you anything. So my wife tells me sometimes, Luis, you can do what you're doing right now in other country, which is a lot easier than doing it in Venezuela. You know what I mean? I'm probably going to be making a lot more money. This is another thing. I'm not getting rich by doing this. I probably make less than whatever less somebody makes here. I don't know. You have to understand minimum wage right now stands at $16 a month in Venezuela. $16 a month. That's less than half a dollar a day in Venezuela. We said we would never become Cuba. And a lot of people said, oh, we're far from becoming Cuba. And Cuba's an island, whatever. And well, Cubans make more money than Venezuelans. They make $24 a month. Okay? So we're far worse than Cubans, economically. Obviously, nobody makes minimum wage back home. You have to make 5 times that to survive, just to survive. And the economic crisis it's staggering to think about it. Just to think about 200, 300% inflation rate. I raised the people at Pasactiva. I raise salaries every 2 months, 20% at least, so we can keep up with the inflation rate. Because then they would have to go and make a line to buy cheap food from the government. And that was it. Yes, and that's how it is. And I say, well, you know why? You know why I do it in Venezuela? Because this is where I was born. I wouldn't have it any other way. You know what I mean? You come from different countries. You probably came here to study, but you plan to go back to do something good for your country, I hope. Because then you can say, well, I'm an international citizen. I can do this thing and get paid $100,000 a year in somewhere else, with my level of expertise. But no, I make like less than $5,000 a year, probably less than that. Still, and that is a decent to make $500 a month back home. You're king, So again, I don't maintain myself doing this. Actually, my family has money, so I'm okay. But nevertheless, it's a fact that if you're a human rights defender, you have to make ends meet. You have to make money. And the fact of the matter that everybody's a human rights defender just doesn't cut it. You have to specialize. You have to study. You probably gonna become somehow human rights defenders. You're gonna work for international organizations that work for human rights, and you'll see it's not big business. So um, it's not big business in Venezuela either, and it's very hard to operate an NGO back home because you're in the constant threat of being thrown in prison because of you receiving money from a foreign government or because you're saying something the government doesn't like and he's saying, can you say anything you like without, the risk of actually arriving to your country? And that's where they get you when you get to the airport. So I would have somebody would tell me, well, Luis, you can't come back. Just try to come back through the border or whatever, and with a coyote or I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that you do it where you do it, given the difficulties, is just because you were born there and you want to do and you want to develop your professional career in your own country and have the accolades in your own country and not in a different one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, just give us your name, and I'm going to take a couple of questions. Just
My name's Alex. I'm wondering, do you feel threatened on a daily basis? I mean, you just said that you have money. So if you have money, does that equal power as well? Even though you work for an NGO, I mean, do people just kind of leave you alone because you have money? You could fight them in some sense, maybe not physically, but you have some standing.
Mm-hmm.
say something about the legal system. Let's go over here.
I'll
Let's
take-
go-
yes, take
yes,
several,
ma'am,
yes.
right here.
Hi, thank you for coming. My name is Maria. I'm an international student from Venezuela studying international law organization. My question for you would be, since you guys are researching organized crime, how does the organized crime related to drugs contribute to the situation of armament of criminals, and how does the police respond in the face of arms?
Off?
Like the arms that are equal
The
or
weapons.
more powerful,
Yes.
weapons
Okay.
that are more equal or more powerful than theirs.
Then the police. Let's take these two questions, and then we'll go to some other questions.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
You want me to answer
Este-
these?
esto
Okay,
es y luego
fine.
vamos a
Okay.
dos más.
First of all, Alex, I don't have a Facebook account. That's not very reasonable or sensible when you're working topics like the ones I'm working. I don't want. I mean, I'm more afraid of organized crime than the state. You know what I mean? Organized crime, has a lot of money, has billions of dollars, and our motto in the observatory is making visible what it wants to be hidden. Organized crime thrives in anonymity, So they don't want anybody throwing light on what they're doing because it's all about money, like the song, right? So basically, in my case, it's not. Well, I can dedicate myself not because I have money, because I can make the ends meet by what I do. It's just about being sensible on your profiling, on your public persona. And in my case, I use social media, but not like Facebook. I don't post pictures of my family, or I'm not like in a yacht, in the Caribbean, or in a private plane saying hello. All these are markers. You know what I mean? Not for I don't know, the state. It could be markers for normal criminals to say, this is a good candidate for kidnapping. He has money. You know what I mean? But I don't feel threatened per se of being a human rights defender. Some other colleagues of my colleagues who defend, for example, they're working in freedom of speech, or they're working, trying to bring justice some people who killed whoever, and or the people who worked with the army issues or military issues. They really feel threatened by the government because the government is always following them and trying to to see what they do. If they falter or they do something bad, they can pinpoint and say, look, this is your human rights defender. He's doing this and he's doing that, or he's receiving money from this or that organization. That's how you could get in trouble with the government, and maybe you can end up in prison. Okay, about the organized crime, drugs. I mean, arms trafficking. Venezuela is not known for a huge arms market, black market. It's usually it's an internal black market. What I mean nowadays, Venezuela it's one of the top three countries with most deaths with grenades. You say, well, how can that be? Are we at war? No, we're not at war. Criminal groups actually have access to army grade weaponry because the military has corrupted themselves to the extent that they transfer these weapons to criminal groups. So now, instead of having somebody with a I don't know, a small weapon doing some heist or some whatever robbery, they have like AK-47 and they have like 2 or 3 grenades they can intimidate with. You know what I mean? So why do they have access to those weapons? Because the mistake was that Chavez promoted the union of military and civilians. Unión Cívico-Militar is what he called. That that the military should be involved in every civilian aspect of life. And that's how generals and other military personnel got into civilian life and also got into citizen security. So what happens in Venezuela is that you have military personnel in an urban citizen context with weapons of war. So if I have a 9mm gun, I go like this, and you have like a rifle. Who do you think is gonna win in that, let's say, contest? Who can fire first? The small weapons guy has the advantage. So it's very easy to steal or to take away a army rifle grade, whatever, automatic weapon that a military is donning, on the streets, because that's not a weapon to have on the streets, basically. So, but because the government wants to have military personnel on the streets, not because they want to control crime. No, it's a means of social control. It's a means of telling the general public, look, we're here, we're already deployed. Don't play any funny business with any social demonstrations or anything. I mean, the military is already deployed on the urban context. They're not there to defend anybody. They're just there to defend the government. If any social upheaval might rise or might explode at any time. So the error back in '89 is that they didn't have the army deployed, or the error they made in 2002 when the state coup d'état that overthrew Chavez for 3 days, is that they didn't have the military deployed. Now they do constantly, and that has to do with how the military has been corrupted by the drug cartels, and how those weapons have ended up not only in criminal gangs and also in prisons. Prison system is, if you want to buy a good gun and good drugs, you go to the prisons, because they search you when you go in, but never when you go out.
Right.
Yes.
All right. Let's take back here in the back. Yes. Yes, sir.
My name is Evan. What are the biggest human rights violations in Venezuela?
Okay.
And the woman right here on the end. You. Hi. Right here on the end of the table. Not you, Roger.
Yes. You.
My question is kind of not directly related to human rights, but in the context of the economic crisis, you mentioned that there are certain areas in which civil society can cooperate, or that the government allows them
Mm-hmm.
You want to tackle these two?
Yeah, I'll take one more. Yes, go ahead.
All right, yes.
Do you think there should be more harm reduction in terms of like drug use and drug trafficking rather than still more of an emphasis on penalization of those who traffic drugs within Venezuela and elsewhere?
You heard the extension of harm reduction.
Okay.
Policy of harm reduction. Great.
All right.
Questions? Thank you.
Biggest human rights violations. Well, in general, I would say that in the period that it's identified with the revolution, saying the rise of Chavez to power until now, obviously the government says, well, there are no human rights violations in that period, in the last 15 years. That's why you have to need you need a change of power to actually address these violations after they leave power, because if they continue to be in power, there will never be a commission or a truth commission or any transitional law or any way of actually bringing justice to victims of human rights in this period, in the period of the revolution. Obviously, they are processing, they are tackling those human rights before the regime. Those are the ones who actually they're looking at right now. Because, again, in this period, there are no violations. But obviously, there have been human rights violations, mostly because I would say, because it was such a huge change that Chavez wanted to impose in Venezuela. That meant bringing down a ruling class, destroying a political and an economic ruling class, and that destruction of those people and those enterprises entail a lot of human rights violations. Okay, people who lost their jobs just because they thought differently from the government. Some of them actually committed suicide. Okay, just to give an example, PDVSA, which was the main oil company back then, and who Chavez alleged, well, you were part of the coup. So all the people who went on strike were fired. 20,000 people were fired. They lost their jobs. Not losing their jobs is just their jobs. They're losing the best jobs available in the country, which was working for the oil industry. And they were very content and very happy because they had good wages and it was a great job. But they lost those jobs. Just Chavez said, you're fired. On TV. 20,000 people fired overnight. Okay? Well, that's a huge human rights violation, just because you thought differently. Okay? And some of those people just fell into disgrace and lost everything. And some of them were found hanging from their homes in their rooms because they couldn't make ends meet, and their world just crumbled around them. And there's other people. There's this famous case about a man who lost his farm, right? Brito. I know the Venezuelans know his case, and he went into a hunger strike because he thought that it was unfair that the government took his land, and he died on that hunger strike, and the government never gave him back his land. The government took a lot of land, destroyed a lot of industry, destroyed a lot of lives. All those are human rights violations, and very grave, I would say. And they were done systematically with specific groups of society. So this all constitutes a clear violation of human rights. So that's why after this regime ends, well, it won't end. I mean, Chavismo will continue even if they lose elections. Some people are looking for some time of transitional justice or some kind of truth commission. So maybe those people can be repaired, some way after losing so much after the revolution took hold. So it's like, what are they going to do after Castro in Cuba? Are they going to, return all those things that they confiscated? I don't know how that's going to work. Or are they going to bring back all those people to their jobs in PDVSA after, a government changes? I don't know. It would be quite difficult. And the economy, medicine shortage. There's something really, really interesting in the Venezuelan case is that we have the highest inflation rate in the world. Shortages of medicine and basic food staples are common. It's like we live in a war zone. If you have children, you need milk, and then you're fighting for milk, and for cheap milk because you might not queue for milk if you pay tenfold what the government sells the milk. So let's say a gallon of milk costs 60 Bs or bolívares. And you can do and queue for 2 or 3 hours and get that gallon of milk for 60 bolívares. Or you can buy it at the black market for 600. You see? It's like Cuba. You go to the black market, you can find meat for $5 a pound, you know? But who can afford $5 a pound meat in Cuba? Well, just the elite, you know? In Venezuela, you know what they do? The political elite, because they can't find things, they just go to Aruba and do their shopping there, you know? Because Aruba is just right there. And you go to the supermarkets in Aruba, you find everything. But the discourse is that the government says that, no. Milk, try buying milk in the United States. You won't find milk. It's a worldwide, phenomenon, Toilet paper, no. You won't find toilet paper, not even not in Europe or United States. There's no toilet paper. That's why there's no toilet paper in Venezuela. It's an international toilet paper crisis. And they eat it up, They eat it up. I mean, most of the people say, oh, well, I guess, everybody's suffering like us. Surely, because the government said so. So the distortions of having a controlled economy just creates so many ways for organized crime to thrive. That's why all products are being funneled to Colombia, because you buy a tube of toothpaste for 10 cents in Venezuela, and you sell it for $1 in Colombia. But not even that. It's sometimes difficult to explain the fuel prices in Venezuela. I fuel my car with 4 Bs, 4 bolívares, 4. To buy one black market dollar, you would have to spend 800 bolívares. That means that I fuel my car. If you take a penny and you break it in 4 parts, I can still fuel my car. You see what I mean? So the contraband of fuel towards Colombia is even the president said it's bigger business than drugs, because you're giving it away just for free. The fuel is free. Just put it in the other side of the border, and it's $2 a gallon. I mean, the amounts of money that these groups are making in contraband is staggering. I mean, it's billions of dollars. And that's why, people get killed, because of this. This business is really big. And obviously, organized crime is behind everything. Everything. From extracting toothpaste, aspirin, whatever medicine. Like, for example, my mother-in-law lives here in Rhode Island. And her treatment for some kind of neurological thing is $700 the box of this medicine here. And the insurance wouldn't cover it here. Her insurance wouldn't cover that amount for the medicine. Back home, the same medicine costs about a buck, $1. The same box that costs here $700, because it's heavily subsidized by the government. So who wouldn't want to bring that drug here and sell it for $700? The same reason why you buy drugs in Canada, you buy medicine in Canada, it's cheaper there. You bring them to the United States. So the economy has become a rogue economy, where you have 2-tier distribution system, where you buy cheap and sell expensive. So people are quitting their jobs to buy cheap products and sell them tenfold their price. It's better business than earning minimum wage. And harm reduction, who was the last question? Harm reduction with drugs? Well, the drug issue in Venezuela, you know where Venezuela is in the map, right? Because I had to show people the other day, because I don't know where, for example, Liberia is, you know. So the thing is that Venezuela is north of South America, next to Colombia, right there in the Caribbean. So our neighbors are Cuba, and after Cuba you have Florida, basically. And to be in that place, right smack in the middle, it's a the geopolitics of that means that Venezuela is a great transit country for drugs. Okay, from there you go to Africa, and then Africa to Europe, where the good money is for drugs. I mean, you have to understand that depends how the market price for drugs varies from country to country. So, guess if you put drug prices in the United States are a lot higher than in Brazil, although Brazil is a consumer country. Argentina is a consumer country. Venezuela is a transit country. Transit. A lot of now because of the involvement of and the corruption within the army. I don't know if you heard about a plane that left the international airport with a ton and a half of cocaine in an Air France flight to the Charles de Gaulle airport, and the, you know, it's it's the army's function for that not to happen, and actually a lot of people, army officials, were imprisoned for that. So we're not consumers, we're not producers of drugs. We don't produce any quantity. At least you're growing some plants in your house, but that's it. I think it's now legal here in D.C., I read. But the fact of the matter is that we're a transit country, and that affects us because in that transit, a lot of drugs stays in the country, and in that transit, obviously, a lot of corruption is generated. Yes.
With the amount of violations of human rights in Venezuela, why do you think the United Nations appointed it as part of its council again for human rights?
Okay.
Human Rights Council, let's take one more question.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid this is probably going to have to be the last one. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for your time. My question is, how do the public perceive and react to the concept and the process of human rights activists in Venezuela?
Okay. You mean the general public?
Yeah, the general public.
Okay.
So the Human Rights Council and,
Yes. Well, the thing with the Human Rights Councils, that's at the UN, right?
yeah.
It's all about politics, I guess. You want to if like for example, we do some events back home on organized crime, and let's say we have a group of people like yourself here, like 30, 40 people, and I always say, well, I know some of you, maybe two of you people here are part of the organized crime thing. Because if I was in organized crime, I would go to events where organized crime is being discussed. It makes sense, right? So I always say when we are doing this, we say, and obviously we always have somebody from the government. Usually the political police is always surveilling what we're doing, looking what we're saying, and not saying something that is not correct, in the context. But again, it's good policy to be in the middle of a council where you would be attacked. It makes sense. I guess that's why they're there, even though they have decided to not to participate anymore in the Organization of American States Human Rights Council. Well, it's just a lot of on policy. Venezuela is very unique in some ways. They do something with their left hand and they destroy it with the right or whatever, and it's complicated. What is the perception of the general public of human rights defenders? That's a very good question, because the human rights community, let's say the NGOs who work this, we all believe that we we have to up the profile of the human rights defender. And not only promote the profile of the human rights defender, we have to explain to people what are human rights. Because you have the government telling people that anybody can violate human rights. If you kill somebody else, you violated his human rights to live. You know what I mean? So you're a human rights violator. You're not a common criminal. You're a human rights violator. As can also be the government, in theory. That is a way of confusing the general public on what is the reality of human rights violations. And the truth is that only the state, through systematic policy, can violate human rights. If you kill somebody, you're just a criminal. You're a murderer. That's what you are, and you go through the normal, court system, and you get prosecuted and you go to jail. But you're not a human rights violator. But they're saying that the government says, the newspaper you read, those are human rights violators, because they're putting all that garbage in your head about the government being bad or whatever. You know what I mean? And the government's doing a constant effort to undermine and confuse the function of what human rights defenders do. That's why in this recent hearing they were saying, we're all human rights defenders. You don't have to specialize. You don't have to be a human rights defender, or you don't have to, for example, create an NGO to uphold the rights of whatever, or economic rights, or social rights, or, So what they're saying because they're aware of it, is that how can I change the perception of people saying that these human rights organizations are just what we call suitcase organizations that are just making money out of foreign money, right? Basically they're just making money. So they have some, not myself, fortunately, but some of my colleagues have been depicted in cartoons, in official media, of having like suitcases full of money, and these are the human rights defenders. They're just getting their pockets full of foreign money because they're attacking the revolution. And it's all about polarizing the society, saying we're in this side and there's the PT Yankees, do we call, no? PT Yankees are petite Yankees, right? But they call PT Yankees. It's fast. So for them, I would be a PT Yankee because I'm here talking at the American University, talking about human rights violations, talking about the situation of Venezuela. So I'm a PT Yankee because I'm here and I'm, speaking my own mind. But again, every human rights organization has the right to exist and has the mission to do what they're supposed to do. In our case, we deal with the crime issue and organized crime and all these things that might not be defending specific human rights or specific cases, but we're defending second and third generation human rights, which are important also today. So again, it's very hard to explain to people about human rights. It's a very abstract concept in some ways, and when you have a government who's telling you, who's misleading you on what is and what is not human rights violation, it's even tougher.